Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on the Europeans.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining, Rebecca.
How did you get involved in reproductive healthcare in the first place?
So that was a long time ago. That's more than 25 years ago. So it's a hard question. But actually, I think it was a coincidence. I mean, it's not never. Nothing is a coincidence. So first of all, I was confronted with the impact of unsafe abortions when I was doing internships in Africa, where women were coming in severely bleeding, almost dying. And I was working there with a doctor who was helping them illegally. And then the other was that there was an abortion clinic around the corner of my house, which was one of the first abortion clinics in the Netherlands. And I happened to pass by, and they looked for a doctor to help, and I started working there. And then I started sailing with Greenpeace, and that is how the two parts of my life came together as an environmental rights activist and as an abortion rights activist. When the first idea was materialized, which was to provide abortions on board a ship in international waters.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you about this aspect specifically. Like, how did you get interested in trying to find these practical solutions to the fact that depending on what side of a border you might be on, a person's access to abortion and reproductive rights can really vary very drastically?
Well, I think that is more a coincidence of how I got involved. I was at Greenpeace boat as an environmental rights activist, and I was very interested in abortion rights. And so I was asking around. I wasn't very well informed at that time. There was not so much information on the internet. And so when we were sailing with the Greenpeace boat in Mexico, we were talking with women's rights activists and found out how complicated it was, that abortion was banned, that what the suffering that it caused. And so it was more kind of, hey, but if we're on a Dutch boat in international waters, then we could help. And that was the first time that we started thinking about the different legal realities. And actually, it's not a new idea in that. I mean, ships have been used offshore for many other purposes, gambling, but also different jurisdictions are also used to avoid paying taxes, for example. So, I mean, it's to find loopholes in jurisdictions has a very long history for other domains. And for example, in the Netherlands, there was a radio station called Veronica that started broadcasting with a ship offshore. At that time, it was 2 or 3 miles outside of the coast. So, I mean, there has been a lot of, I think that has been done before, and it's just the first time that it was actually used to advance women's rights and rights to abortion. That's the novelty around it, that we used it for that.
As you said, you have worked in this field for decades now, and I'm really interested to hear in the long view. So, what are the major changes you've seen in abortion care and reproductive health care in Europe and beyond during your career?
Well, we were part of that revolution, right? We were actually quite lucky to start at the beginning when medication abortion became available. Women on Waves was founded in 1999, and the medication abortion was registered in the Netherlands in 2000. We did our first boat campaign in 2001, and we immediately understood what is the power of this medication. And what is interesting is the moment that you read back in history, we were not the only ones, of course, but we were young and we didn't know that at the time. But we were riding this wave of, the upcoming internet and medication abortion. So I think we participated in making online abortion pills available. We were the first one that did it in 2005, so that women could order abortion pills online. This whole self-managed abortion care, training women's rights organization, putting the pills in women's own hand, so that it demedicalize it. No more gatekeepers. That was all the things that we started, and it's a reality in many places where, telemedicine is now, for example, the main form of abortion care in the United Kingdom, but also in many states. In the United States, it's allowed, it's done. And we wrote the first scientific research together with Karolinska Institute that this was safe and that women could do it themselves, because we had started Women on Web already in 2005. So it's been a really interesting journey, and to see how the full potential of the abortion pills really became available concerning abortion. And now we want to go beyond that, which is, well, mifepristone, which is used for abortion, is actually has so much more potential for other fields as well. And it hasn't been this, developed, even though it was known from the beginning. It hasn't been developed for these other indications. And so we really want to work to something where abortion pills are actually available over the counter and not just underground, which now is the case, but also in regulated systems like in Europe or in the US or things like that, so that it will be available in a way on women's own terms, in accordance with the safety profile that it has, because it's safer than many over-the-counter painkillers, it's safer than Viagra, and like the morning after pill, it should be available over the counter. And that is really the next step, where we want to go about across around the laws. We really want to go and make sure it's regulatedly available like that.
When you describe developments like that, the global picture seems pretty positive. But when we look at certain parts of the world, like notably the US or somewhere like Poland in recent years, it's easy to feel like the global picture for abortion rights is getting worse. Do you believe that to be true, or do you take a less pessimistic view on things?
Well, no, I think I'm very pessimistic on the state of democracy in general. And that is, women's rights are part of that. So it's not like, I think your pessimism is definitely, I share it. But for me, this is not necessarily about abortion rights. It's just one of the forms that the autocracy and the lack of, democratic values are being implemented, which is taking away women's rights, but it's gender, it's the environment, it's everything. So I think when we look specifically about abortion, the nice thing is there's abortion pills, right? You can take away the official right, and it will have an impact on people, but it's a very different situation than it was 50 years ago, when women had to, resort to all kinds of invasive methods, that are very dangerous, that led to infections, and even death. That is not the case anymore. I mean, the abortion pills are there. They will be available, whether it's through underground networks or the internet or above ground networks. That will continue to be there no matter where. It's the Poland, it's the case, in the US, in the case. The problem is that for the people that are less literate, it's more harder to find. So it will always cause some people not to be able to access the abortion care. People that don't have access to internet, people that don't have they don't understand how it works. On the other hand, if we compare it with before Roe versus Wade, when I started aid access in 2018, actually abortion access was worse then, because it was very expensive. Abortion was costing at least $600. There were no free abortions available. And that is all the case now. There's now abortions. If people cannot pay, they will get it anyway. It's much cheaper for other people. So, I mean, it's not a black and white thing. So concerning abortion rights, I'm really positive and optimistic, because I think this is never going to change. For example, in Russia, they now also are taking mifepristone off the market, because in Russia there's also a pronatal policy, of course, because of the exponential, the war in Ukraine, but also other war intentions, and I mean, of course, that can, but then that also there the pills will flow in from India or any places.
To shift gears a bit, the investigative journalism project Exporting Abortion recently published some findings. Let me see that at least 5,000 European women travel abroad to receive abortions every year. maybe surprisingly, these aren't all people traveling from countries like Poland. They are really traveling from all over the EU. So I wanted to ask, why would someone travel from a country where abortion is legal to go somewhere else?
It's only when they're too late to get access to abortions in their own country. Belgium is known, Germany is known. You can have an abortion till 12 weeks or 13 weeks there. But also, for example, Germany is really problematic because you have to have mandatory counseling, waiting periods. The counseling, a lot of gynecologists don't provide abortion care, so people have to go to clinics, especially when they live in rural areas. It's very difficult. They have to travel for hours. And this was the situation in the Netherlands before as well. And since the 1st of January, general practitioners, family doctors are also allowed to prescribe the abortion pill. But we know that any obstacle you put in place is going to harm women. And that is why it should be available without gatekeepers. But mostly the traveling in Europe is done by people that are beyond the term that they can get an abortion in the other countries. Like mostly past 12 weeks, some places 18 or 16 weeks. And then they go to countries where it's possible, like the Netherlands or the UK, or Norway, Sweden. They also allow for later abortions.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about the way that abortion works in Europe?
I think many people don't realize that there are so many different laws. Many people think it's available, that it's a right. It's not. There's only one country in Europe that has where it's a constitutional right, and that's France. And in the Netherlands, it's actually still a criminal offense. It's still in the criminal code. We have not been able to change that yet, and that is true for most European, all the other European countries. It's still a criminal offense, and it's an exception in the law that women are allowed to have an abortion, and that is very problematic because it should be considered at least a normal medical procedure, if anything, but it's not.
We've seen the political right in Europe taking inspiration and money from anti-abortion campaign groups in the US in recent years. In Hungary, for example, the government in 2022 adopted this, the kind of law that already existed in several southern US states, where a person seeking an abortion is required to listen to a sonogram of the fetus before going ahead with the procedure. Tens of millions of euros in funding has also been flowing from anti-abortion groups in the US towards Europe. Are you worried that this could contribute to a similar rollback of abortion rights in Europe to that's been seen in the US?
Yeah, I don't assume. If we look back 150 years ago, for example, before 1880, abortions were pretty available, also with medication, with pills. And then it was suddenly, everything was totally banned all over the world, US, Europe. The reason why that happened was because there was a birth rate decline of white women, and a fear of immigration. We have the same situation now, where politicians are calling for women to have more babies because we need more babies. And so we are facing a similar situation as we faced 150 years ago. So I think the change can go very quickly, and it will be very hard to stop if it happens. Because right-wing populist politics are going, it's directly connected with controlling women's bodies. So, yeah, it can happen.
We know very well that history can repeat itself. It's quite true. I'd love to talk about your latest project, which is a scientific study, which you've already mentioned, about the use of mifepristone, the same pill that is used for abortions and also sometimes during miscarriages to evacuate miscarried fetuses. The study is about using this as a regular contraception. Can you tell us about why this is so exciting, or what makes this different as a method of contraception?
So when mifepristone was discovered, it was already one of the indications that they looked at for as a contraceptive. Actually, Balieu, who just recently died, unfortunately, he used it as contragestion. And it's similar to, for example, what an IUD does as well. An IUD is also preventing the implantation of a fertilized egg. Mifepristone is a bit different. The mode of action is a combination of delaying ovulation and changing the endometrium so that a fertilized egg cannot implant. But why it's so exciting is that, first of all, in the last 70 years, no new contraceptive has been really developed. The hormones that were with a different mode of action, as they call it. So the hormones that were used to combine estrogen and progesterone, they were just little different formulations, but they were all based on any contraceptive method that is now used, whether it's the pill, the patch, the implant, even, and then you have, of course, the barrier methods that are not using any hormones, or the IUD that you can use with or without hormones. And so the problem with the combined oral contraceptives is that it has a much higher risk of thrombosis. It is 3 times higher risk for thrombosis. And thrombosis, it means that there's a blood clot in the developing in the veins, and that can be very serious. You can have serious consequences. And the other thing is that there's an increased risk of breast cancer with every year that you're using the estrogen or combined hormonal contraceptives. And so what is so exciting about mifepristone is that women that have, for example, a gene, it's called a BRCA gene, that is increasing their risk on breast cancer, they cannot use normal contraceptives, but they could use the mifepristone 50 milligrams. It doesn't have high risk on thrombosis. We already know that. We also know from other studies that have been done in other countries over the past 20, 25 years that the side effects are much less. The only side effect that has been recorded is less bleeding. So women will have almost no menstruation anymore, which most people prefer, actually.
I was going to say most women would probably quite like that as a side effect.
Yeah, exactly. But also, you can use this morning after pill, which means that it allows for on-demand use. So either you use it weekly if you have a lot of sex, or you just use it before or after you have sex when you have less frequent sex. And that, of course, is giving a tool in people's hands that they can use it as, depending on their lifestyle and on how they, and I think that's very important. And there's a big need for that. There's a big unmet demand. We know that also from research. So we are very excited about it. It's been very difficult to develop it because medical studies are expensive and difficult. And of course, mifepristone is not under patent anymore, which means that pharmaceutical companies cannot earn money on it. And contraceptives in general are very cheap. So you cannot have a very high cost. You cannot, it cannot cost much. So we have been able to get the funds together from a crowdfunder, and there's some foundations and a lot of individual women that have donated. And we started the study in the Netherlands 3 weeks ago, enrollment. So we have permission from the Medical Ethical Committee that the medication was produced for this study. And we already have almost 50 people that are participating. So we hope that we can really get the results very quickly.
Exciting.
Some people are critical of the idea of making abortion pills accessible without speaking to a doctor. And that's including some people who aren't principally against abortion, who do think that it should be possible, but are worried about people needing more care. So both in terms of physical, mental care, but also the psychological or emotional impact of terminating a pregnancy. What would you say to those people who are concerned?
Well, I think that based on my experience and also scientific research, we know that people are very capable of dealing with medication abortion themselves. If they need further support, many people speak with friends or family. The reality since, even 10 years ago has changed so much. People are all using apps to track their menstruation. They know that they're pregnant already, even before they get the menstruation. Pregnancy tests are positive already before people are actually missing their period. So these kind of arguments are actually really old-fashioned. because it's referring perhaps more to a situation that was there years ago. And if people need more help, I mean, there's much more. I think it's by controlling access that people are creating anxiety. And there's many things that people can use. They need to have instructions how to use it. And they do that very well with everything. Like, if you buy bleach or cleaning material, if you want to unplug your toilet, you need to really read carefully what you're using because it's really dangerous stuff, right? And so in that is really actually kind of a very fundamental distrust of women when you're already saying things like that. And it's like doctors like to have power and keep power, and that's what they do. And that is how abortion became illegal in the first place 150 years ago. And that takes other forms now. So I'm very critical of doctors that are saying that there needs to be a provider in between. I think they are more concerned about their own role than about women's needs and actual capabilities.